Good afternoon. Do you remember what I told you Tuesday morning? As I got started, I said the evidence will show that on Saturday, December 6, 2014, nearly 4 years ago, I said that Miss Jessica walked and she talked. And she didn't try. She told them who did this to her. She also said her name. She said Jessica. Some points she said Chambers. She said, he set me on fire. Eric set me on fire. Those are the facts. Now, I know the state had Dr. Hickerson there to testify and talk to you about what his opinion was, but Dr. Hickerson was not there. He just wasn't. The medical personnel was there, the emergency responders, the firefighters, they were there. And you know what? Each of us knows that medical science is not absolute. It's not 100%. And miracles do happen. Things happen on a day that ordinarily his opinion may be one thing, but what 9 other people witnessed, that's what they heard that day. Now, the state really talked about pieces of this puzzle. Excuse me, my nose is running. They talked about pieces of this puzzle that they wanted to fit together. And the state talks about that continuously. That's what happened. Now, I do take a minute to commend all of those persons who were out there that day for documenting what they felt like they heard, and that's what they did. Those reports are in evidence, and it didn't waver, not a moment. It's in each of the reports. Look at it. You had 7 firefighters as well as 2 law enforcement officers. I don't think their statements are in there, but you heard them on the stand that that's what their testimony was. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you all went out there. We were all out there, and we heard the noise level, and I saw several of you kneel down to hear what it would sound like where she was laying there, where they had her. And what I found, and what I know you found as well, is that you could hear. In the midst of all of that noise, there were several trucks that were running. You could still hear, and it was much like it was quieter down there at that level, listening to her. And as many of them told you, they kneeled down, some intentionally got face to face with her. One laid down on the ground to hear her. One said, I'd rather hear her myself. So he got close to her. And then lastly, another female, she kneeled down. And her husband said, well, I saw her kneel down. And so the state wants to say today, well, because the doctor said, who was retained by the DA's office to be here, by the way, too, the doctor said that she couldn't have said that, when indeed, he just wasn't there. Now, truthfully, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, this is where our problems start. And I'll say it as simply as this. I'm the oldest of 3 girls. All my dad had was 3 girls. And what he'd say to me as a girl, he was tough on us, was that call it like you see it. You pay attention to what's going on and you call the facts as you see it. And simply as this, once law enforcement got involved a little bit from the beginning, then it moved from Eric to Derek. We're in the ambulance. I know the first law enforcement officer said, was it your boyfriend? How would he even know that? He knew her. And I still say that she had a boyfriend by the name of Derek as well. So it started to move away.
I object. There's absolutely none of that in evidence. I object to that recollection. That is absolutely not in evidence.
Objection noted, the overruled. You may continue.
Now, there's movement from Eric to Derek. and then other individuals, which quite frankly, I have no problem if you're searching for who did this. However, they did go as far as, I think, Yazoo City, Iowa, all of those things. But in essence, if you have a victim, if you have a young lady who's saying to you, Eric did this, then that's what you search for. She had 2 Erics in her phone. Now, what you heard from the state was that they checked the 2 Erics out on Facebook, and there was no connection on Facebook at all. Now, these are folks that are in her phone. Well, once no connection, I said, well, what about swabbing them? Because we all know that some other folks got swabbed who were there with her earlier that morning. Those people got swabbed. But were they swabbed? Did you hear any testimony from any witness that stated, well, yeah, they were swabbed? That wasn't confirmed at all. These are persons who were in her phone. And then listen carefully the language that they've used thus far. They downloaded a database that included all of the Erics that they thought. But I asked, did you go through that, or what was the mechanism to search for this person? And basically what was told is that, well, no, we used it to search against names we already had. So don't be misled by the fact that they did this active search on Eric. That didn't happen. They had a database that they checked against that database whenever a name came up to see. Now, in looking at the area that was searched, not a lot of talk about that either. Miss Jessica came walking from the opposite direction. The car was here. She came the other way. What about that? Has there been anything specific in investigating that portion of things? Search and rescue, they said. I believe Daniel Cole talked about that. Well, they did. Search and rescue went up one street, down the next. Well, what about just beyond the area where it happened? Did you hear any specific testimony about that? You did not. Now, again, let's talk about search and rescue, and let's talk about these keys, Miss Jessica's keys. Found by a person, let me read it, a person associated with narcotics agent Tyler Mills. That report is in there too, by the way. Make sure you look at it. Found the keys 2 days later. Look at the date. This happened on Saturday the 6th. 2 days later, on Monday, is when he said he found these keys just a little ways from his house, which also happens to be across the street from where Miss Sherry Flowers, where her house was. Really? And then where is Mr. Jerry King today? Did he testify at all about, well, I found these keys, and also the report was written by Agent Mills? Think about it. What about the house that the keys were located? Did anybody talk to them about these keys? And so 2 days went by where their keys lay right there in the ditch there. 2 days. But remember, search and rescue was sent out. No more details about that. So this is the deal here. This case had come to a standstill where December 2014, now we're almost October 2015. Aha moment. I think that's how they referred to it. So we get phone records back, and what Quinn has said early on about what happened in the morning and then sometime after that is now inconsistent. Now, don't forget, we're dealing with cell phone records, which aren't precise to the point. They've told you, you may be in Mississippi State up there, but we can't say exactly where you are. No tower in Cortland, don't forget that. We got Tower Batesville and then Pope. Cortland in the middle, no tower in the middle. We got no location data. If you recall, I had to ask about that. They didn't mention that. But as we went through those lists of stuff that was analyzed about cell phone data, there was no location data on Quentin's phone, which has a tendency to be more precise. AT&T, no location data, which that wasn't analyzed from his phone. Mainly everything came from Miss Jessica's phone outside of the dumps from the phone numbers that were received from Quentin's phone, of which he voluntarily gave them the phone. Also look at the records show that Cortland is below coverage line. Look at it. But I know Mr. Paul stated to you that, well, you still get coverage beyond that. But when you're looking at those maps, it's showing that Cortland is below that coverage line. Now, in looking at the videos, certainly they were recorded. First two were not, so we are not exactly sure what he said the first two interviews because they weren't recorded. But we have the last ones that we all reviewed. I've reviewed many times. He was off track about some of the things as far as him talking details. We're a year later. Now, this is the thing here. Did he appear to be dishonest? That's the basic thing that we seem to go back and forth with Mr. Paul and then Agent Meadows. Well, no, he kept talking. And he kept saying things in response they're asking him. He's freely talking, even after he admitted that, or he inquired, I thought my lawyer was supposed to be here by now. But he continued to talk about and wanted to give them information about what happened. And so this is where things turn to. They began to lead him, guide him, manipulate just a little bit as to what happened. I think they call that law enforcement techniques. What they do to try to get a suspect to say something, I believe is what they call it. Someone saw you in the car with her that day, a black male. We asked, well, no, that didn't really happen. Well, your phone was right on top of her phone. You were saying that to him the whole time. And then when you watch the videos, you see him start to think about it. Well, maybe, was it that day? Well, I know one of those days I gave her some money for food I went across. Well, the text messages show you that that actually happened the Friday before. So was he being dishonest? Or was he trying to recollect what happened after being talked to 10 months from when you talked to me the first time? Some point, death penalty comes up. It's like, wow. But what does he do? Continue to talk to him. And then he says, well, show me. I mean, I don't want to lie. I want to tell you what happened. I want to be sure as to when it was, because, again, we're 10 months later. Ladies and gentlemen, use your common sense. He was sitting in a room for hours, might I add, over a period of days, talking to law enforcement who were constantly asking, when was this and when was that? Well, you said this, but now you're saying this. Well, what did she have to eat? Well, let me show you this. Do you recognize this? This must be you here. The timing of it. Now, let me tell you why this is important. Why am I going on and on about this? Well, it shows that the same type of thing with the other witnesses that I brought before you today. This is what went on when they talked to them too. Miss Latoya, she worked for the sheriff's department. She told you, I call them and say, hey, someone called me. Or at least she was on the phone talking to someone and a car was on fire or there was some type of fire. I hung up, I called and I said, look, can you dispatch somebody out? They continued to talk to her. Talked to her that evening 3 or 4 more times asking the same thing. Then lastly, what do? they go and they apparently try to arrest her son at school, but he just happened not to be there. Come to the house, and she says, you know what? I'm going down there with him. You're not going to talk to him, but I'm going down there with him. Quinn could have stopped at any time. He could have stopped talking at any time, but he didn't. And when he did stop for a minute, finally got upset when they accused him of killing her. He's like, look, wait a minute now. I didn't do this. And I swear on my mama, I didn't do this. And he gets upset, and it has to stop for a minute. Quentin just met Miss Jessica. Have we forgotten that? He had recently met her. They were friends. I don't know why it took so much for Mr. Paul to admit to me that they were friends. They did stuff that folks do. He went to the doctor with her, giving her money for food, hanging out, smoking, actually, of which Miss Keisha told you Quinn didn't smoke, but he was with us. And trust me, they knew his name. Might not have been identified in the phone, but they knew Quentin's name. Come on now, let's use our common sense. And you can check my phone now, and I got some unidentified numbers in there, a lot of times because I did just meet somebody. I delete my text messages every other day. So that suggests absolutely nothing. Now here's where the manipulation in this puzzle. Now I'm saying puzzle because that's what they've been saying. It's a puzzle, and the reason I've mentioned about my witnesses who were here today is because it shows how they do business. I talked about harassing Miss Latoya, a dispatcher who worked for them. Her son, sure, his name was Eric. That's great, I'm glad they did. But you went there when she works for you. She could have very well just brought him down herself. Mr. George Mister. Guns everywhere. With her that morning, of which that's not in the pack. When you look through the pack to what went on that entire day that Mr. Paul presented to you, you don't see that in there about Mr. Mister meeting her. Well, he did that morning, that Saturday morning. 2 days later, he's at the store with somebody else. Guess who gets ripped up by the police and taken down to get talked to? Swabbed and cleared as a suspect. His name is George. No problem again, because he was with her. But it's how you do business and how business continued to be done in this case. Miss Rag Ann, his sister, they went and picked her up from her job, brought her down again for questioning. And then we got Big Mike, who conveniently, I don't know if you remember, when he was questioned, wanted to hesitate about knowing her even. This is folks who hang out all the time. She says Big Mike is not truthful. Now, whether they went to the game or not, I can't say that. Looks like they did, but they went late. He was with her that day, and Quentin was out there that day. Now, what I feel is continued doing business and harassment is Miss Sherry Flowers, who conveniently comes forward in 2018, in June of this year. This happened 2014, December. After she is called by a deputy she knows, she says, hasn't identified a single person. She picks up an unknown black male who is conveniently related to a person who had a smoke fire within an hour of Jessica getting killed. Something seemed a little suspicious to you? Somebody just showing up now making these statements. Seems made up to me. And access to the records, the fire department has had it all this time. And then I would imagine the Panola County DA's office got it too. We got it, but they had access to it all this time. And quite frankly, it's just not right to manipulate the puzzle the way it's moved forward this way. Quite frankly, it makes me a little bit emotional to say that. I told you not to get distracted by their experts. I said that in first day. Dr. Hickman's testimony fit their puzzle. He would not back off at all. Even when I said, well, she walked, well, that's a different type. Apples and oranges, I think he said, something to that effect. There are instances when things happen differently. He just didn't want to back off, fitting their puzzle, making it work to prove what their theory is about what happened. Speech pathologist. Her testimony was at best questionable. And then she asked to speak to her lawyer. Odd. But again, it fit their puzzle. We got Miss Stacy from the Mississippi Crime Lab that said the keys excluded Quentin. No DNA on the keys at all. That's the stronger test, more reliable test, which, by the way, Quentin's name was left off it. We had to say, she said, yes, we did. That was a mistake we made. But she said his name was excluded, meaning DNA excluded from being on the keys. Now, a less stronger or accurate test that shows the presence of 4 males still can't say his DNA was on the keys, though, because you're searching for male. No blunt force trauma from the autopsy, none of that. No evidence of Quentin handling gasoline. He had a motorbike. Paul Rowlett's cell phone records were completely a presentation against Quentin Tellis. You have that pack back there. He prepared an intelligence packet that showed a complete review of what he felt his analysis would be during this entire case. Look at it. Miss Jessica called people all day, page 37. You'll see it. And from 11:05 to 5:29, I asked, well, who are all those calls? He done listed. He said, I know exactly who they are. Well, I didn't ask him, did he tell you? There's lots of other numbers that she called during that time frame. Yes, Quentin got his details mixed up, but cell phone texts and calls cleared that up for you. Cleared it right up. Quentin was her friend, albeit with benefits, I know as people say. There were other texts he made that, yes, sex was some of the issue. It makes no sense, again, that he would do this to her after meeting her after a few weeks. He told you he wouldn't. You heard him say that. There is reasonable doubt in this case. Where is Eric? The investigation, from when I told you that on Tuesday, where is the actual search of Eric, who she said did this? For these reasons, we ask that you find Quentin Tellis not guilty.